All right, folks, as offered, it's a one guest town on episode 68 of the Spicer Speaking podcast. Enthused to have a great one. He's the gentleman, as I said at the intro, that I grew up reading, eating my Frosted Flakes over the sports page and breakfast. Proud to say that now a colleague and also a friend and playing partner when he makes his way from the Twin Cities out here to the desert proper. I think he usually does that come the new year. So at least I'll have to wait to get our rounds in a little bit. You know him as Shooter. I also know him as such, but let's call him Charley Walters, longtime columnist for the St. Paul Pioneer Press. You can find him at twincities.com. Greetings, Shooter. Appreciate you joining the program.
Hey, Judd. Always good to see you. Looking forward to seeing you in the winter, buddy. And I know you're hitting it pretty well. You always hit it pretty well. So that'll be fun.
I just step up for you. I raise myself to the level of competition.
Your father. Your father.
Speaking of competition, let's get underway. This could be a little Minnesota centric for some, but if the analytics of my show bear out anything, there's a lot of Minnesota listeners and a lot of Snowbird listeners that tune into the podcast. So let's start with talking about the 6-1 Minnesota Vikings, which every game is seemingly closer than it should be. Every game is maybe a little more interesting than it need be, but in the NFL, a win is a win is a win. And I feel like the national media, Shooter, in recent days after we felled Arizona on Sunday, is finally starting to talk about the Vikings as a top 5 team in the NFL. Your assessment of that?
Well, they're forcing them, forcing the national media to talk about them now. They're fine. They're good. They're not great. We'll find out. They should beat Washington. I think they play at Washington. That should be their 7th victory on Sunday. What's happened here, Judd, is that other than the Eagles, 5 of their first victories were against teams that had sub 500 records. Washington is 4-4, I think. And so competition hasn't been great, but as you pointed out, you play the game ahead of you. You try to win the game ahead of you, and they've done that. And so it'll be exciting because when they get through beating Washington this Sunday, I think they go to Buffalo, and that's the Bills, and that of course will be the real test. But they passed their test. They've done well. It's an A team. They're great as an A, and they've got new leadership. Kevin O'Connell's a guy that the players all like. They didn't like his predecessor, Mike Zimmer, the tough guy, grumpy guy to play for, and so it's worked well. I mean, it's funny because Kevin O'Connell and Hackett, who was hired at Denver, who is now struggling, both those guys interviewed for the Vikings job, and both those guys interviewed for the Broncos job, and the Vikings chose O'Connell, and it's gone well. They're both $4 million salaries in their first year, and so the Vikings seem to have made the right pick. The kid, I think he's only like 36 years old or something, and but he seems he's a likable guy, and he's calling the plays, and he's got the Rams pedigree and all that stuff. And so it's funny because the Rams, without him, he was the offensive coordinator last year for the Rams, and now what are they, 3-4, 4-3, something like that, and the Vikings are 6-1. But yeah, they're good. I mean, they're fine, not great, but that's fine. But the league is not great. The Eagles are good, the Bills are good, Giants are playing well. But other than that, it's not so anything could happen here. I think it was in 2003 or 4 or something like that. They started off 7-0 and ended up 7-9 or something like that. So you never know. I mean, there are some crazy figure, but we'll see how it goes. The schedule gets tougher after Washington.
Undoubtedly. I'll get to that in a second, but based on your mention of O'Connell, it's kind of amazing to me that, again, the lack of coverage. I mean, the sports world is basically an NFL machine where the days between games, the national media is just 24-hour talking head type television. And usually the national media jumps on a guy like Kevin O'Connell, a young guy, first head coaching job. As you said, his age, I think I was in 5th grade when he was born. which is to say that, yeah, he's a young NFL head
He-
coach.
Right now, Judd, he's among the top 2 or 3 for NFL Coach of the Year.
Absolutely.
If you had to vote today.
Have you had opportunity since you got the gig to connect with him, chat with him a little bit? Okay.
No, I haven't. I'm just writing my columns sporadically. I'll be out there next week chatting with those guys, but I just write every couple of weeks now, and so I'm not there a lot. Used to be there every day.
You mentioned the upcoming Viking schedule.
By the way, I'm sorry, what?
The upcoming Viking schedule you mentioned, Shooter. As you said, at Washington, Kirk Cousins returned to his former team. And then the litmus test really does begin for the Vikings, as you referenced, at the Bills, then back home against the Cowboys, and then the Patriots on Thanksgiving. That game is also in Minneapolis. I feel like that stretch of games, if they can somehow get through that, say 2-1, then the Vikings are for real.
Well, exactly. They're for real in the division, regardless. Packers are 3-5. Vikings have pretty much won the division, and I'm saying that because even if the Packers start playing well, they're still, I think they're 3.5. I think they're 3.5 games behind in the division already, along with the Bears. So the Vikings can kind of close into this, even if they play 500 football the rest of the way, and then you get the playoffs, and who knows. But Cousins, you mentioned Cousins, he's playing pretty well too. That's a surprise. Another thing that's funny, Las Vegas comes out every week with these odds of what players win or are favorites to win the MVP award.
Yeah.
And I think last time I looked, or a few days ago, Cousins was 25-1 to win the MVP award in the NFL, and Rodgers from the Packers was 100-1. Can you imagine the turnaround on that thing? What's happened in a year? It's interesting. So that's representative of the whole league this year. The league is, it's fine, but there aren't a lot of great teams, and the Vikings have kind of earned their way up there.
Are you a believer, and we're going based on track record here and performance in primetime games? I'm not a huge Kirk Cousins guy. Are you a believer that he is somebody that can still go into the postseason and win 2 or maybe 3 playoff games?
No.
Neither am I.
Judd, people are as good, teams are as good as their records, as their past records. Cousins is a 500 quarterback his whole career, and although the Vikings been fortunate too, injury wise. They got a couple. Tomlinson and what's his name are out for maybe this week.
Smith, I think, yeah.
Not well, yeah, but other they've been health wise. It's a big deal in the NFL or anything in pro sport, any sports. It's a big deal, and they've been healthy, so that's been a good thing for him too. But I'm not a Cousins guy. He's played well. O'Connell's built the offense for him to make him successful, and the guys of Irv Smith's another thing. That's a guy that I'm sure they're disappointed in. But Zaharia Smith, got him from the
been phenomenal.
From the Packers, and Harrison Smith, speaking of Smiths, has played really well. So yeah, they're all they're fine. They've done what they've had to do. They've won the game out in front of them, and we'll see what happens from there. But yeah, this is a it's a team to root for. And the ownership they got good guys running that thing, Mark and Ziggy Wilf. So we'll see. But yeah, everything's gone well. And as you started to say, when I'm watching ESPN mornings before the games, it's been glaring how they have omitted the Vikings coverage. So they're not believers either. And the Vikings there's not much controversy there. Maybe that's part of the reason they're pretty smooth, just moving along. But they're forcing them to pay attention now.
A couple more on the Vikings. You mentioned Mike Zimmer. Some really tragic news from earlier today. His son, Adam Zimmer, just 38 years old. He was the Vikings co-defensive coordinator the last 2 seasons before that regime was moved out. There was very few details. I'm not necessarily asking if you have any details or being salacious, but Did you
I
ever
don't.
cross paths with Adam Zimmer? By all reports, a young, talented, smart guy.
Yeah, well, nice kid. And I'm trying to think of where was it, Cincinnati? Where was he?
Yeah,
Was a consultant for those guys, I guess.
yeah,
That's awful, just awful.
yeah.
And Mike Zimmer still, he has his some friends still around here up in Mendota Heights where you're from. And I think his dad is around occasionally. But anyway, so that's awful. Simple,
Terrible.
and I don't know anything else about it. It was a bulletin that came out this morning, and it's it's just really sad.
One more on the Vikings for you, Shooter. Today, as we're speaking, is the NFL trade deadline. This will come out
Yes.
tomorrow. Opportunity for you to look really smart by the time this comes out. I don't know if in your digging around or a little birdie told me or text messages, if any
Well,
rumblings of the Vikings acquiring anybody have come across your desk.
that's a good question. They're 6-1, new GM, new coach. They're winning, of course. I don't know if you would disrupt the team by making a significant deal. They don't have 4th, 6th, and 7th round draft picks for next year, which would be chips that if you were going to make a trade. They've wanted, it's my understanding, to get another wide receiver because Thielen's lost a step and he hasn't been able to get the separation that he has in the past. So they'd like to be able to get another wide receiver to stretch the field. I think they're disappointed in Irv Smith. And they'd like to get a fast tight end if they could, but I don't know what you have to give up for that, or if they've got enough to give up for that. And my guess is they'll stay where they are, and that would be just fine. I don't think there's going to be a lot of big deals anyway. It's hard to make a deal in the NFL. The other part about it too, Judd, is that this management indicated early in the season that they felt that you don't build this. And the Rams did it. They went all in last year, but these guys don't have a quarterback to go all in. Cousins is fine, not great. And they implied that they're going to just build this thing year by year by year over several years rather than trying to do something right now. They're not that good enough that 1 or 2 players is going to make a big difference now.
Right.
But we'll see. But I'd be surprised if they make a deal.
Friends, you're tuning into episode 68 of the Spicer Speaking podcast, visiting with Shooter himself, Charley Walters, longtime columnist with the St. Paul Pioneer Press. You can follow his work at twincities.com or just go buy a newspaper. This interview brought to you by Healthy Learning at healthylearning.com. When I have writers on, Shooter, I always like to ask a little writerly questions. I count well over 4 decades that you've been in the sports writing trade.
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning. 48th year. Can you believe that? I'm 75 years old and it's my 48th year. I've retired 5 times. I've left 5 times, Judd. They keep sucking me back in there. So here I am.
Right. It's like the Godfather.
Yeah. You asked me about, what kind of guy Kevin O'Connell and some of those guys. When I was writing 4 and 5 columns and 6 columns a week, I'd be around all the time. But my last deal, when I retired last February for the 5th time, I said, this has been great, thanks. But the newspaper said, well, how about if we do this? You just write whenever you want. And so I write every couple of weeks. I could write 2 or 3 columns a week, or I could write every couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. And so I thought, well, that's a pretty good deal. So I do that. So I'm not around. I've got my sources. I've got a lot of people, contacts, and all that stuff. I've got 3,500 telephone numbers in my phone right next to me. But so I still have money. I can still find out. I still know what's going on, but I'm not around as much as I used to be because I don't need to be. And so that's what I'm doing. Yeah, 48. I'm in my 48th year. Can you believe that? I can't.
No, I can't either, because when I read your columns, they still seem fresh and they still seem well informed. Doesn't seem like there's all that much, at least not a half century's worth of tread on the tire. Oh, no. Let me ask you, Shooter, what if you were to pick one thing between the biggest difference in the trade of sports writing when you started and the business of sports writing now? What's the biggest difference?
Well, I'm so impressed with the younger guys that we have. They're really, I mean, I'm a journalism grad, University of Minnesota, trained professionally and all that stuff. The people we have today are that way. When I came to the St. Paul newspaper, 3/4 of those guys on a staff of about 25 didn't have any college, or, they just kind of walked in, and they did fine. But the kids, I don't say the kids, but they're the people we have now. They're just really, they're highly skilled, terrific writers. I'm not a great writer. I'm a reporter. I'm trying to string 8 one-syllable words together with a period. But the kids today they're so well trained, and they're aggressive. And as you know, the most important part of this business is energy, and being passionate and persevere and so on. And that they do that today. I am so impressed with the people we have in St. Paul. Minneapolis newspaper has a terrific staff. They win all kinds of awards. We won 3 Pulitzers at our place.
Right.
But I'm very proud of the younger people. They're professional, and they're go-getters, and they're better than we were when I came to the newspaper. It's and you mentioned before, if you still buy a newspaper, that's true. I mean, if you do buy a newspaper, these kids are terrific. They're reporters today, and most of them are. We have reporters and writers, but most of them write really well. And it's being neat, if you're a sports person, if you're a fan, or just want to know what's going on, you can read that newspaper every day and get a lot of stuff.
What about from the athletes side of it, and yourself, obviously, and as I offered at the beginning and at the show, you're yourself a former professional athlete, but from that side of it, from the late 1970s until today, you notice a big difference pound for pound between the people that you and your colleagues are covering?
Just that the you talk about the athletes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, they're just more aware. They're more careful what they say. Early 4 decades ago, 3 decades ago, our business is relationships too, and players, athletes have to know that they can trust you with certain things, and you have to be fair and responsible too. And so that's different. I mean, my dad always told me, he said, Charlie, remember this, we live in a wonderful country. You can think anything you want, just don't say it. And so many guys now have they gotten, and I mean, you could go right down. I mean, there's so many of them. They said something. You'll say something to a reporter you shouldn't say to a reporter or to anybody. Sometimes their careers are gone just like that. And so athletes, I think, are very aware that they better be careful what they say, because with all the instant social media and stuff, it's out in a hurry, like this Zoom and whatever else they got, internet and so on. So they're a lot more careful, athletes, and I understand that. I would be too when I played. Excuse me. I was always careful about what I'd say to somebody. Why would I jeopardize my career? And
Right.
like I said, like my dad said, you can think what you want, just don't say it. So they are careful. Athletes today are very careful, and I don't blame them. And so I understand all that. And I've had Judd over the years, had times when I've interviewed people in clubhouses, locker rooms, and they'll say something that's borderline controversial, and I'll say to them, "Are you sure you want to say this?
Really?
Is this the way? This is the way it sounds?" And I remember I had Torrey Hunter a couple of times when he was with the Twins, and Torrey's kind of outspoken. I say, "Torrey, you sure you mean this?" and so on. He said, "No, let's back up on that." And some guys, a quarterback with the Vikings, it was the same way. I'd say, I don't think you want to say this, but think about it, and then you might back up. But because you have to be responsible to the athlete too, and they have to be responsible to you. So it's a matter of being fair. Fair is a big deal.
Do you feel like, having been a professional athlete yourself, that it gave you some kind of a tool that writers or reporters that were never in that realm, or you're able to look at connecting with pro athletes through a different lens, given that you've been there?
Yes, yes, I am. I know what it's like to be sitting in the clubhouse. I was with the Minnesota Twins major leagues 1969 for a couple of months. I know what it's like, and I understand, of course, the media's responsibility, and I understand that what the athlete's responsibility is too. And the big thing, Judd, is to be fair and careful, and play well. You know, do your job well. And then, and if you don't, then you got to be. I mean, I have homerism. We got that on these Vikings radio broadcasts and all that stuff. It's embarrassing. But you don't want to be a homer, but you want to be fair and objective as you can be, and so that the reader or the listener gets the true story.
Couple more for you today. Again, visiting with Charley Walters of the St. Paul Pioneer Press. Follow his work at twincities.com. Going to see you out here come 2023, Shooter. You and I have enjoyed some desert rounds in the past. I always like to ask folks this because I have an answer myself that is kind of built in, but do you prefer golf in Minnesota more or golf in the Coachella Valley more?
Well, that's a fair question, but I mean, Minnesota, as you know, Judd, spring for the most part, summer, September, fall, it's hard to beat for golf. It's hard to beat. But we're coming, as I mentioned to you before, earlier, we're coming. This is Tuesday, I think. We're coming in Friday. It's going to drop right off, and we're going to have a long November, long December. You have to be careful walking up to the mailbox. You could slip on the ice, and there's no golf. And so I can't wait to get down to the desert. And we've had a lot of fun times playing with you and your dad and a bunch of people down there, and Palm Desert and Palm Springs. I just love that place. My dad used to tell me, he said, Charlie, there's a reason why that people down in Palm Springs, Palm Desert in the area, there's a reason why these people go there. They could go, a lot of these people could go anywhere in the world in the winter, and look who they are, and there's a reason they're down there. It's great. Palm Springs, Palm Desert, it's great. And I love playing down there, and lucky to be able to get down there. We'll be down there for 4 months, really lucky to get down there.
I look forward to having you. And I mean, as a style of play, I've long learned that I always play better out here. And a lot of that is because from the tee box, at least with the resort style courses that we have out here, they're designed, they're intended to be generous from the tee box where you can kind of spray it around. Whereas Minnesota golf, I always feel like it's claustrophobic. You got to squeeze something in, bend something off a tree lining. And I wasn't that great at it before. And even though I've gotten better at golf in the dozen years I've been out here, when I go back to Minnesota, I'm not that great at it now. This style is more forgiving, I think.
It's true. I mean, that's true. It is more wide open. The ball rolls better and farther. And but still, Judd, as you know, you got to get it in the hole. And I mean, that's hard to do on any golf course. And I'm generally trying to break 90. So, but I love the challenge. And I don't know how many, we've got 100 golf courses in the Palm Springs area.
120.
120. I mean, how can you beat that? And the weather, and to be outside and exercise, and the score really doesn't matter, although it's still a challenge to play well. But we're fortunate to be out there. I love Palm Springs, and like you say, the fairways are a bit more forgiving. Of course, I play it, and you've played it up here in Minnesota. It's pretty tight, Southview Country Club, and the ball doesn't roll that well. But that's part of the game. It's the challenge of the game. Dig it out of the hole, work at it. Hogan said.
That's right.
Dig it out of the dirt. Dig it out of the dirt.
The answers are in the dirt. That's right.
That's right.
Well, it seems like you got at least a couple days left to practice before you start swinging in your living room for a few months and get out here. When we play come January, I'll have to give you a few strokes, Shooter. Until then,
a few strokes from you, Judd, as you know. But I also get a few from your father. So
Until I see you out here, so appreciative of your time. Great to visit with you. Pardon me. Thank you for joining the Spicer Speaking podcast. It's Charley Walters, longtime columnist for the St. Paul Pioneer Press. Thanks for your time, Shooter.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Judd. Keep up the good work. Proud of you too, being from Minnesota and doing so well out there. Keep up the good work. See
Thank you,
you
sir.
in January. Okay, buddy. So long.